So these two cops are talking in front of me. It doesn't matter where or when, but one says to the other, "Hey, you should listen to his podcast. It's really good. He plays Pink Floyd," which is bizarre. That's the impression that you'd be left with, that I play Pink Floyd. I don't recall playing like a whole lot of classic Pink Floyd. I've used a lot of the psychedelic Syd Barrett stuff, particularly in the episodes having to do with the Pinnell Institute or the Douglas Hospital, and that's kind of it. I've saved the classic Floyd intentionally. It was a big favorite of my sister's. Those four classic albums of metal: Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Wish You Were Here. Those four. And this song I remember quite a bit, coming from her room. Montrealers know one of these days, because it was used as the intro to the nightly news, The City at 6, nightly broadcast, CFCF 12, I think. This is Who Killed Teresa. In performance art, in theater, there's a concept known as the motivated cross. Right. The idea is you never in moving across the stage, you never take an unjustified movement. It has to be motivated. Like otherwise, you're just dancing around the stage. So if you're stage right and you want to go stage left, there needs to be justification. Like you're going over to the desk to have a glass of water, or to pick up your glasses, or put on your hat to go out the door. But you can't just be careening around the stage. It just translates as nervous energy, and that you don't know what you're doing. So today's episode about Sicko is what I would call a motivated cross. I'm going to talk about Sicko as a means to justify getting into other things that we want to talk about. So today is this is about a government report about the 1970s that was produced in early 1980, and it's pithy, it's dense, and it should be considered and reflected upon deeply, because it sets the table for what followed in several biker wars. When you say the biker wars in Quebec, it has different meanings for different people. There were several biker wars. Certainly one in Montreal in the 60s. Certainly a second wave in the 70s. Certainly in the 84, 85 era. And then later with the Rock Machine and the Hells Angels in the 90s. That's the one most people traditionally think of. But there are waves of biker wars, and what I would argue is, a lot of people with these things cost millions of dollars and lives. You always see the hand wringing, and how did this happen? How could this happen in our province? And I would contend that the government knew the extent of the problem and sat back and watched it unfold for decades. This may be a short episode, but I want it taken in context, in isolation, because I don't want it to get lost under the wheels of another story. So SICO was the Commission of Inquiry into Organized Crime, and it was set up under the Liberal Party's Premier Robert Bourassa in 1972. And the goal of SECO was the dismantling of drug, gambling, and prostitution networks in Quebec, targeting in particular the Italian mafia. The Commission's original mandate lasted only 3 years, but that mandate was extended 12 times, 10 times those extensions at the request of the Parti Québécois Justice Minister Marc-André Bédard. And so SECO lived well into the 1980s. And, before we beat up too much on the Parti Québécois, the Liberals under Bourassa Robert Bourassa were every bit as corrupt. Nothing would have been any better under the Liberal Party had the separatists not gotten into power in 1976, 1977. Let's be clear on that. So SECO was intended to only go after the high echelons of mob power, and was avoiding street level operations. But the government quickly broke their own rules, and they began to probe into everyone's business. If I haven't already said it, Quebexico is a very small place. In the beginning, the panel, there were these hearings, right? And these panel hearings looked into the gaming world and wiretapping initiatives like Operation Vegas. By the 1980s, they had their noses into corruption in the fur industry, the Liquor Commission, tainted meat scandals. It's well known that the Catroni family sold tainted meat to Expo in 1967. The head of Quebec's Bar Association quipped, "Any gang of bums is considered to be organized crime." Any gang of bums is considered to be organized crime. Now, some very good work got done under SECO. The commissioners, one of whom was Denis Dion, the ad hoc coroner, who found officers criminally responsible in the Rock Forest massacre case. He held mobsters like Paolo Violi and Vincent Catroni to account daily and live on Quebec radio and television. Mr. 10-4, Sika Viel's Claude Poirier was a constant presence on the radio in that era, covering the whole SICO affair. The commission investigated the Dubois clan, the 9 brothers, with a criminal operation of 200 people in Montreal's Saint-Henri district. And it's worth noting that SICO operated under the umbrella of the Quebec Provincial Police, the Sûreté du Québec, and their offices were located on the top floors of the SQ headquarters on Rue Parthenay in downtown Montreal. So for today, I want to focus on a SICO report published in 1980 titled Biker Gangs in Quebec, Les Bandes Motardes au Québec. And for our purposes, this report tells us tells us what the government knew about motorcycle gangs in the 1970s, or what they thought they knew. And I think that's really important. There's a lot of information here where you're going to probably know, well, we know that. Well, we know that. We know. It's not important what you know. It's important that you understand that this is the government's understanding in 1980. What we know now is that within the decade of the 1970s, police severely underestimated the threat of biker gangs. The Quebec government incubated their growth, providing government assistance through projects like the Merck experiment, which we've talked about. And by the end of the decade, biker gangs had become such a serious threat that Marc-André Bedard saw the need to study them. And that's important, to study them. Not to do anything about it, just to look at the matter. And we'll get... we'll get to that in a moment. So Biker Gangs of Quebec, this report, and if you go to the website, theresaallore.com, TheresaAllore.com, there's a link to the entire report, Des Motards du Québec. It's in French, but nevertheless, a listener, this is not my work, a listener found this report. It's gold. It's absolute gold. Primary document. It's broken down into two sections. Part one focuses on biker gangs in several targeted regions where the commission held these focus groups, these sessions, and they are the port of Saint-Pierre, Sept-Îles, Montjoly, Saint-Gideon, Sherbrooke, and Asbestos, and Danville. Part two is more of a sociological study where the commission conducted interviews with various players in the biker world. And the report ends with with recommendations, and we'll get to those. Punchline, it's a real kicker. So the SICO report begins with a simple question. Who are these bikers? These bands of fun-loving, misunderstood youths who had grown from street peddling of drugs and prostitutions to now acquiring substantial assets like $1,000 vehicles and tracts of real estate. Who were these guys? So SECO then answers this question. To be honest, some motorcycle clubs, especially those discussed in this report, are bands of lazy, lawless parasites, drug addicts, the diminished and the contaminated. They have no legitimate aim or ambition. They expect nothing from life and society and have nothing to offer to others. They are violent and dangerous for those around them and for themselves, which makes them an organized crime environment even more dangerous than the mafia or other organized crime groups which have been identified in the past and whose ongoing criminal activities consist of murder, trafficking of drugs and offensive weapons, theft and concealment of automobiles and motorcycles, assault, rape, and intimidation. That's Les Bandes Motards au Québec, 1980. The introduction continues. Indeed, these gangs are well structured, and their members appeared to us as major traffickers in drugs and offensive weapons. It is from there that they obtained most of their means of subsistence, as well as the capital necessary to acquire buildings and very expensive motorcycles. The number of crimes of which they are guilty, the sexual orgies of which young girls, sometimes underage, are victims, their dirty clothes, the heavy metal belts, the knives, the chains, and the metal badges they wear. Their sessions, initiation secrets have earned them the admiration and fear of others. But we must keep in mind that all this staging is only a facade to cover up well-established criminal organizations whose activities are very lucrative. And that's 1980. That's very, very true, and greatly argued. Stagings, these visual cues that are so seductive. Even to this day, you see, if you go on social media, you see the glorification of the image of the biker gangs, and it's a very contrived effort. Whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on Instagram or anything, to solidify the glory days of the biker and that legacy. The introduction ends with this account of the typical biker, and it's telling because though it's not specifically addressing Lennoxville, Quebec, it gives an accurate account of how drugs might take control of a high school in Lennoxville, like Alexander Galt, say, or a college like Champlain or Bishop's University, how organized crime could coexist with seemingly upstanding homeowners, taxpayers, local businesses in a sleepy little town like Lennoxville. This is from Sico. Needless to say, the meeting with a 22-year-old biker, physically built as a piano mover, who received a social assistance check for $417 per month on the pretext that occasional asthma prevented him from having a job, and who confesses to us that in reality he leads a very comfortable life because he is a wholesaler of drugs sold to adolescents in secondary schools and cegeps, is an experience that we have experienced and that should be the launch of a collective effort to eliminate... You gotta have the cat. A collective effort to eliminate these unnecessary and harmful groups. The Outlaws and the Hells Angels are arguably the most powerful clubs on the North American continent and possibly the world. The Hells have their headquarters in Oakland, California. The Outlaws are established in Chicago, Illinois, as attached annexations show. During the 1970s, we saw the Hells Angels and the Outlaws lead an intensive campaign to amalgamate the other motorcycle clubs with a view to exerting even greater territorial grip and making substantial profits in the drug trade, prostitution, counterfeiting, and other related crimes. Several members of these gangs are now investing their profits in legitimate businesses, restaurants, shops, furniture, etc. In the following chapters, we relate the main incidents and activities of bikers in each of the regions visited during this investigation. It continues. The evidence shows us the evolution of bikers. The turbulent youth have moved on to organized crime. Weak clubs rally to stronger ones when they are not devoured by them. Lucre wins thanks to narcotics. Bikers engage in all kinds of criminal activity as long as it pays. We're actually seeing a restructuring of clubs that will make them more powerful, more elusive. In Quebec, there are 14 biker clubs with a criminal tendency, which should not be confused with a majority of honest sportsmen. It is known that in the province of Ontario, the Outlaws have recently allied Toronto's two most powerful clubs, the Vagabonds and the Paradise. They took over the Satan's Choice, the Last Chance, the Iron Hogs, as well as the Queensmen and the Lobos in the area of Windsor. This annexation phenomenon began to make itself felt in Quebec as well. The Hells absorbed the Popeyes of Montreal and became affiliated with the Marauders of Asbestos, the Missiles of Lac-Saint-Jean, and the Sex Fox of Chibougamau. It is always a good day when you get to say the words, the Sex Fox of Chibougamau. Oh, okay, keep it together, John. Continuing, to the Outlaws in Quebec. They had already absorbed the Satan's Choice of Montreal, and they recently succeeded in affiliating themselves with the Nomads of Valleyfield. All these names are starting to come together. And then we get to a bit that I love. Women are abused in motorcycle clubs. After a first motorcycle ride, the young girl is exploited like a thing. It belongs to a member or to all members of the club. That's the way it's written. It belongs to a member. It is exploited like a thing. Sooner or later, she will be abused. Many work as dancers while withdrawing social assistance, which they pass on to the bikers. They often become prostitutes. Well, there it is. And, again, I'll say to many this will seem like old news, possibly quaint. To me, it's astonishing that as early as 1979, the Quebec government had a full grasp, had completely contextualized the problem at hand, and still did not see the need to address the crisis with any serious actions. And this is clear when we turn to SECO's recommendations in this report. So here it is. This is the recommendation. We recommend to the directors of municipal police forces to inspire the methods used by your authorities in Quebec City and its police force to eliminate the annoying and noisy presence of bikers among your local and tourist populations of Old Quebec within the limits of this territory. The police force of your city of Quebec also applies for your entire summer season a foot patrol program which employs 2 to 6 police officers in the evening, depending on the extent of the foreseeable faults. The instructions given to the police officers who carry out this patrol and the equipment with which they are provided should, in agreement with the authorities of the police force of this city of Quebec, who deserve to be recognized for their efforts and their successes in the field, do subject of verifications on the initiative of the police forces, which have to intervene to suppress the escapades of the motorcyclists, in order to apply at home the fruit of a profitable experience and fertile in results. Very flowery. No, I'm not kidding. That's it. I am not kidding. To the prospect of biker gangs totally overrunning society and overtaking business, government, property transaction, the Quebec government recommended increased foot patrols in the summer months, so as not to disrupt the tourist trade. And I guess a noise reduction ordinance. that it's like putting a Band-Aid on an amputation. And when you read the report, I can only guess, because don't get me wrong, this report is not complete junk. Many of the conclusions argued in the report are very well argued. Lucre wins thanks to narcotics. That's it. That's the game in a nutshell. And they're arriving at this, very well. I'm sure they knew it in the 60s even, but we'll get there. I can only think that someone intervened when they got to the point of recommendations and said, hold up a bit. Let's not go too far here, because they were corrupted, because lucre wins. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an amputation. And what I find acutely disturbing is this is coming out on the heels, personally, of my sister's body having been discovered in the spring of 1979. So if you consider that, I think the inquiries would have finished by then. The report was probably being drawn up. It was being written. So this is being written and considered in the wake of not only Teresa's murder, but hundreds of murders of women and abuses of women still unsolved to this day in the decade within the scope that this study took place. This is who killed Teresa. If you have any information about unsolved crimes, cold cases, you can contact the Sûreté du Québec at 1-800-659-4264 or at CIC, which is Centrale Information Criminelle, CIC at Sûreté, SURETE, .qc.ca. And if you go to the website for the Sûreté du Québec, see some interesting new cases here, which I've not seen before. Some new cases. Diane Couture is here. Sherbrooke Unsolved Case 1997. Diane Malouin. It's the 1977, the woman found behind the falls, Montmorency Falls, near Quebec City, 1977, Diane Malouin. I thought that one was solved, but apparently not. They now also have links to Cavac, Evac, but they're neighbors. The RCMP, they link to RCMP New Brunswick. They link to the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, Unsolved Investigations website. That's very neighborly. And on the social media front, they have links now to Facebook, Twitter, etc. Good stuff. Sûreté du Québec, keep it up. That's enough for today. This has been Who Killed Teresa? I'm your host, John Allure. Have yourselves a great, great day.